The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim and Fallout 4. Both big role-playing games made by Bethesda Game Studios and published by Bethesda Softworks. Both pissed off old fans, both enjoyed by me. Both the first game of their series that I played, but both not perfect in my eyes. So, to see what they did and didn't do right, I'm going to compare the two. I'm not a big reviewer, I'm not an industry veteran, I'm just a player like any other. So my opinion is meaningless, and my conclusions pointless. Let's get started. And a good place to start, to me, seems to be their start. The introduction and tutorial up till the moment where they set you loose in their open world. How long do they take? How well do they explain the game and the world? How good are they overall? And what else can I point out about them? Watch out! 100% spoiling the beginning of both these games and some other minor spoilers.
War. War never changes.
Both games start with an exposition dump. Fallout in the form of short shots with exposition. Skyrim with a not too natural conversation. Both have pros and cons. Fallout can be skipped and doesn't add strange conversations to the world. But Skyrim immediately puts you in the world, so it doesn't start with an out-of-body experience. What the exposition about is very different though. Fallout does a really good job of setting the stage pre-war, whereas Skyrim gives more information to people returning to the world after Oblivion, while leaving new players more in the dark. After replaying Skyrim, I did find out that it does introduce a lot of the major people right off the bat. The Imperials, Stormcloak, Thalmor, Alduin, and a couple of important characters within these factions are set up from the start.
General Tullius, the military governor. And it looks like the Thalmor are with him. Damn elves. I bet they had something to do with this.
While Fallout at most introduces Voltec and Kellogg. A large part of the Fallout 4 narrative is of course getting to know the world post-war. While that is of course impossible in Skyrim, where else could your character have been? This does bring up an interesting discussion for another time. When I compare the two, Skyrim is pretty weak, but a lot stronger than it looks, while Fallout is pretty strong, but a lot weaker than it actually looks. What also must be taken into consideration is that in Skyrim you find much more optional lore. This is something that the Elder Scrolls has more than Fallout in general, but still must be mentioned. In Skyrim I always find mixed unit tactics and a brief history of the Empire, Volume 1 and 2. These books give quite a bit of backstory about Tamriel, and Mixed Unit Tactics even introduces the idea that these books are written by people with their own biases. Both games followed the exposition dump, although Fallout a bit later, with a huge danger. In Skyrim, in the form of almost being beheaded, and a dragon, who both tries to murder you and saves your life. In Fallout, in the form of a nuke, and just making it into the vault in time.
The vault! Step on the platform!
And here, I have to attack Fallout. When you think of the opening, how many of you think of the nuke? I for one never remember that part. A nuke goes off, the world is destroyed, and I don't remember it? I don't know if it is because they follow it too soon by another big event, or that they fail to make me care about the world or what. But no matter the reason, the blowing up of the world wasn't a memorable thing. And the death of your spouse also isn't as big a thing as it should have been. Multiple people have said this. You just don't get the time to really start caring about them. The big gut puncher just becomes a plot point for many, not something they really care about. It works in the story, but on an emotional level it is really weak, as you just don't get the time to bond with her. Or him, of course. And when you compare it to Skyrim's Dragon Attack, it just doesn't really come close. The Dragon Attack feels more devastating than the nuke, as you immediately see the destruction it causes. It follows you throughout the entire tutorial, never letting you forget it. It is much more basic than Fallout, but maybe because of that it works better. If you think about it, the intro of Fallout is a lot better than that of Skyrim. It adds more to the story, it is a better setup. The problem is that when you play, you rarely think about it. When you just go by how it feels and how you experience it, Skyrim works a lot better. But this is something I would love to see some feedback about. Do you think that Fallout 4 does this as bad as I make it out to be? And do you think that Skyrim's more basic danger works better than a more complex threat of Fallout? What might not look as important, but I think is a really important part of the hook that is the first couple minutes, is enemy variety. It can show how varied these games are. In Fallout you face rat roaches. And more rat roaches. And more goddamn rat roaches. I'm sorry Fallout, this is going to hurt again. In Skyrim you face humans in the form of either Stormfolk or Imperials, both melee and with bows. You also face spiders who will spit poison at you, and a bloody bear who is a big danger but shouldn't pose too big a threat with your companion. And I know what Fallout is going for. Is anyone still even alive? Is this it? Just the animal known for that they would survive the nukes? Really cool idea, but also really boring. And it doesn't really work for anyone knowing anything about the game by, for example, seeing a trailer. The only enemy you will face can only run at you and do a very weak attack. Enemies in Skyrim aren't very hard, as the entire game isn't that hard. But they can attack and do some real damage, they can block, they can stagger you, they can attack you at range, you can't attack them. They can poison you over distance, blurring vision and doing damage over time. And it isn't all the exact same. Even though Fallout, once again, has the more interesting idea, Skyrim works better. There's just more variety, making it more interesting. And giving a better introduction to the rest of the game. This is an unscripted part. I don't want to attack Fallout all the time. It's just, when kind of trying to look at it in detail, I just have to say that Skyrim seems to come out of top an awful lot of the times. I don't know why, it might be my nostalgia blindness, but, well, I have to be, well, I want to be honest, and when I try to look at it as objectively as I can, Skyrim comes out on top. Nothing against Fallout, it's just how it turned out. But let's look at the gameplay side, which is of course a major part of a video game tutorial. Both games have a lot of systems to introduce, and introduce a fair share of them. Both teach the basic movement system, melee combat, ranged combat, Skyrim both in bow and arrow and magic, and the loot system. Fallout also introduces that, and Skyrim also introduces lockpicking. When comparing the two, Skyrim does a lot better in my opinion. Many of the introduced systems are also introduced by the character that is with you at the time, instead of only a message in Fallout. Skyrim also gets more out of the way. Not all systems are introduced, and the magic system is lacking. It does introduce a larger percentage of systems. The last systems it really has to introduce are the crafting systems.
Go ahead. I'll follow your lead and watch your back.
Fallout still has to introduce both hacking and lockpicking and all of the crafting systems. Not only the more complex weapon and armor crafting, but also the workshop and how power armor works. Fallout does have more things to introduce, but it introduces less than Skyrim, while introducing lockpicking and hacking should have been easy. Just make the door to the overseer's room an easy lock, and his terminal an easy hack. Overall, Skyrim also prepares you better for the rest of the game, while for Fallout the next couple hours or so still feel like the tutorial, although that can be skipped as you are set free in the open world. Skyrim also has an optional practically tutorial you can follow, which is always way easier to avoid. But after you are done with the tutorial in Skyrim, the game is pretty much done with teaching you shit, while Fallout has to continue. If I gave points, this one would also have to go to Skyrim. Also an important part of any tutorial is to not take too long, but also not be over before the player is ready. So how long do these tutorials take? Their lengths are pretty similar. Fallout takes around 40 minutes, while Skyrim is around 30. Both these lengths are pretty okay. In under an hour you get most of the basics out of the way and are set loose in the world. Though I would say that the shorter intro of Skyrim might be a plus, as both are pretty long tutorials that keep you from why most people really play these games.
We're all brothers and sisters in binds now.
But what is of course also important is how long they take if you rush through them. In a second or third or 10th playthrough, you won't slowly go through it looking for loot everywhere. You just want to get to the part you want. So how long do they take? This will surprise quite a few people, but both take 15 minutes. In Fallout you can skip the intro cutscene, but makes you wait a lot. So overall it will take about the same time. But for rushing, Skyrim feels so much better. It starts with what is pretty much a cutscene until the moment where Alduin wrecks everything. And after that, you can run through the entire intro, not waiting for your companion or anything. Fallout makes you wait a lot in the intro. Wait for your wife to enter the room, so Sean will start crying, so the Vault-Tec guy will slowly start walking over.
Looking in on next week's forecast, we have a high of 52 on Monday. It also appears our troops stationed overseas are experiencing some unusual weather as well. On the island of Mamba Jau, the nights are cold, unseasonably so for Southeast Asia. But for the 5th Infantry, that's as comfortable as an autumn jamboree. All the easier for our mechanized Hellcats to drive any screaming commie memes.
Can you get that?
Good morning!
After which you have to wait for a conversation to end, so you can go to crying Sean. Then you have to wait for the door to open, so you can sprint to the vault. Then in the vault you have to wait for the doctor. Then for the cutscene to play. And then you finally can make haste. Both probably make you wait about as much. But Skyrim makes you wait at the start and then you can just go. Fallout makes you wait. Do something, wait. Do something, wait. Etc, etc. Fallout feels like more waiting, as you have to wait more often. This one definitely goes to Skyrim.
What the hell?
So, when comparing the two, Skyrim comes out on top almost every time. Only the intro exposition is very in the middle, both having strong and weak points. But in all other parts, Skyrim does most things pretty good, and all a lot better than Fallout. Fallout has a lot of good ideas, but they don't work for a game. But an important thing is always to remember in these kinds of things. It's a great line from Miracle of Sound. We bitch because we like you, and we want you to be great. I'm not attacking either of these games because I hate them. I'm attacking them because I love them. No game will ever be the game that made me a gamer and a modder. Only Skyrim has that spot. And while Fallout 4 was far from the game we all hoped it would have been, there's definitely quite a bit of fun to be had. But when looking at only the introduction, Skyrim is a lot better. In the next video, I'll be looking at either the next couple hours in these games, in which they really divert, but also do a lot of the same things, but in very different ways. Or I can look at my past experience with these games. Less focused, but maybe a good thing to know if you want to judge my judgment. The choice is yours, in the straw poll below. But when all is said and done, I just have 2 more quotes. War. War never changes. Us. Da!